Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors meeting for Monday, September 30th, 2019. I will call the meeting to order. First item of business is to review the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Jeff has moved, Santos has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 3 is to receive comments from the public, where we open the meeting up to discussion from members of the public on any item that is not already on our agenda. If you'd like to speak, I ask that you please state your name and address for the record. Is there anybody wishing to take advantage of the opportunity? Yes, sir.
Yeah, because I don't see it on, here real quick. Kyle Gertz, Nichols, Iowa. I'm just following up, looking through the agenda here real quick. I apologize for being a few minutes late. Following up, as we've got more support here again on what the next step is. I know everybody's been watching the news and seeing what's going on with Sheriff Ryan, and my question is what's the board's next step in the process to further the investigation?
Specifically of
I know there was an investigation done by our county attorney, but I believe that there's probably enough people sitting here in the room and in the county that would agree that that's probably not a thorough investigation. I don't accept it. I don't think there's a lot of people in the county that will accept it. So what is our next course of action if that's not an acceptable investigation?
Well, I believe we received a message from the county attorney just recently saying he did not find any wrongdoing. The letter basically said that the deployment of staff.
So is that investigation or looking at whatever? Is that made public? Do we have that?
It's a public document.
Is
You
it?
certainly can have it.
Yeah, it was sent back to the Board of Supervisors, so it's certainly a public document.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you give us an email, we'll send it right to you.
Okay. All right, I can get it from you.
Great.
Okay.
And
All right.
anybody else who wants it too. In terms of what your next steps are, I don't know. That would be a legal question.
Okay.
We're not here to give legal advice. We are certainly not empowered to do anything. The county attorney, he's the attorney for the county, obviously.
But he's also an elected official along with C.J. Ryan.
Which
That when you start talking about an internal investigation, basically, what are the results? Find out the best results you're going to get.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's what the law sets up. I know there is a provision for, I think, again, this is not legal advice, there is a provision in the Iowa Code about somehow private citizens can bring an action if they post a bond and do some things against an elected official. I'm not terribly familiar with that, but that would probably be your option at this point.
Okay, that, and I believe, as citizens, can we also go to I'm not asking for legal advice, but does the state attorneys general could be the next step above county or the DCI?
I don't know.
I don't know who can request from the Attorney General. All I know is what's the board that, Nancy, what's the board? Help me with this on civil service or commission, is it PERB board, not PERB board?
No, PERB is union.
What's the ones that look for ethics violations and all that?
Ethics board?
Yeah, the ethics.
The ethics board. The ethics board would probably be the only one I could think of that might be, and it's easily found on the website, and you can contact, and they actually follow up on everything and get back to you. And that's really the only avenue I could think of, and it's not something you would have to do that.
Okay, all right, well, I appreciate it, and we'll take the next steps we can take. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else like to comment publicly? Alrighty. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, which is discussion and possible action to approve and authorize the chair to execute a DPS Governor's Traffic Safety Bureau grant contract in the amount of $38,900 with Captain Jeff Mullen. Good morning, sir.
Morning. This is a grant that we've had for several years. The GTSB gives us 734 hours of overtime. This year we'll get 2 moving radars and 2 PBTs. It's a year-long grant.
What's a PVT?
So it's gonna ask.
Preliminary breath test.
Oh,
Get
okay.
them on the road for field sobriety.
Well, they didn't know it wasn't a PCB, so it's like, they didn't want
You
those.
didn't know what it was when they gave it to you, Jeff, is that?
Well, I'll move for the approval.
Jeff has moved, is there a second?
I'll second it. I still got another question.
Well, Doug got his seconded first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you very much. Hopefully we're coming through now, we'll try and talk a little louder. So any discussions on this?
So, when you said the what'd you call it again?
PBT.
PTs. Are we just checking for alcohol, or are we now
Yes,
checking for?
alcohol. These are for alcohol.
Okay. Do we have anything that checks for
At
drug
this time, no.
use or? Okay.
No, other than the officer's observations.
Is that something available?
Not that I've found. They're working on stuff like that, but right now there's nothing.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Is it, if this is an open question, I have one question that about distracted driving. Are there things on the horizon or changes in that?
It keeps coming up in the legislator. Right now, it's really hard to prove. You have to prove that they were texting, unless they're under 18, that they can't have their phone at all. That they were texting, but they can also use it for GPS. Over 18 can use it to talk on it. It keeps coming up, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't go any further. Make it where hands-free. But at this time, no.
What, does it cover, like, if I say, tell Siri to send a text and I'm just doing it all voice, do you have to actually be bup, bup, bup like that? What's the rule there?
Well, there's different criteria. If we're gonna stop somebody, we almost have to be able to count how many times they poke on their phone.
Wow.
You have to see them do it, which is, in itself is hard because highway speeds, if I see them with their phone, that's not enough.
Yeah.
You have to follow them. A lot of times sitting at a stoplight is where you usually see them the most. Because you're sitting there, they're sitting there. For whatever reason, legislature hasn't moved forward with it.
I asked because, I'm on the road all the time, and I had a couple of trips to the Quad Cities last week, and I literally wanted to call 911 several times. I saw individuals off to the shoulder, over to the side, and I could see their head bobbing and moving, and I don't understand why people think they don't understand how dangerous they are with the amount of traffic and the speed of traffic on 61. That's a disaster waiting to happen. I'd hate to see somebody lose their life because of something simple like that. So, thank you.
Well, that's one of the reasons they're trying to bring it up is fatalities are going up and they're attributing it partly to that.
Well, I see it. I drive on the road. I see it all the time. It's crazy. No text that important. Okay? Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, sir. Next up, item number 5, item from Mike Nolan with Horizon Architecture. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. All right, so we should have a small novella to go through this morning, but we're going to do some wrap up on the courtroom. We're going to talk some jail issues, and then we'll talk about the sheriff's addition. So first of all would be wrap up with the courtroom. So what we have with this is I have the final 3 change orders essentially to run through with you, and then we'll run through a financial full accounting would be the last piece we have here. We have change orders number 7, 8, and 9. So number 7, which is up here you have in front of you, is essentially for some lighting changes. I apologize if this didn't get kind of brought back throughout the process, but there were a few places where we had, pardon me, either changed from drop ceilings to hard ceilings, or they were just basically incorrect on the plan to begin with. So this is the change for the lighting from Turner, from Nelson Electric that came through with Wolf. So what you see here in total is we had the back bathroom and that small conference room, the foyer, and then also in the jury room, we had to change and upgrade the lighting. So the total for this is $6,532. Upgraded lighting, good stuff all the way around. So my recommendation is to accept this change order with the backup documentation. The second would be to raise the handrail section on the second floor. So we did the top floor, and you can see if you go back in right now, you probably won't be able to tell that we did anything, but we actually pulled the handrails off Had some basically rings fabricated to bring those up from a 36-inch to a 42 full guardrail height. We had the upstairs, the third floor was included with the project. As we got further into it, I think we made a decision to do the second floor as well. Again, that was, you know, to increase and enhance the safety and to make sure that matched throughout. That work is installed and completed. Again, apologies I didn't get to you guys in. It was a matter of the process of not making sure that we had the general contractor get that to me and get it in front of you prior to having the work installed. Again, looking at the price on this, I was actually quite surprised and thought it was very reasonable for what the work was done. I mean, it looks incredible, like it's always been there. So, again, my recommendation is to approve this as part of the project. And the last, this is work that has not yet been completed, or is a request on one of the walkthroughs to potentially take the wood sills throughout the courtroom in the renovated area and go over those with a solid surface material, essentially just to put in a more durable material over time as we're doing the upgrades. So with this change order, we would take a solid surface countertop, very similar to the countertop material that's over top in the new benches, and essentially give a you can see there's a little bit of wear over time that wood that's on the current sills. It's just going to take a little more maintenance. This would be a very low maintenance approach to that. So this again is work that's not been completed. If this is something that you accept, then we'll get Wolf in there to get this work knocked out. So that would add basically a solid surface countertop to or sills to all the windows in the courtroom area.
So, of these three change orders, Mike,
Yes, sir.
the first one you said is the lighting, correct?
Correct.
So that's nonsense. And then the other two, are those planned to be done by Wolf?
The second one is already completed, and that was already completed by Wolf, and then the last one will be done by Wolf as well. So they would manage that.
So just curious, what happens if we don't approve a change order once it's already been done?
That is certainly within the right in the process is that, you know, the general contractor knows that they should not complete work that does not have an approved change order.
I wouldn't be worried, I'm just curious.
Yes, and I think we have had that conversation with the general contractor, and so one of the, as we are transitioning into these new projects, I'll have a much more hands-on approach they're going through, day in, day out, but yes, absolutely, that was within your right not to approve that work. However, I think that as the process kind of kept moving along, I think it worked pretty well, so we could give them a little benefit of the doubt and a slap on the wrist.
Well, as someone who spends a lot of time in the courthouse and sees kids playing around that rail, this is gonna do my heart good to have a little higher guardrail out there, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know why we didn't think of that when we did the original letting. It's,
I know it was discussed, I think it just didn't make it onto the
Yeah,
plan,
it's
so.
a good idea.
and I also understand, you know, that was a question I had on some of these that, I call them kind of no-brainer change orders even. You know, you do a project, you do contingency, and I would think, you know, maybe in the future, a project like this, we would consider having like an Oscar or Sherry as a lead and give them an authorization within a certain framework.
We have a policy in place that authorizes me to sign change orders up to $1,500 if delaying it for a board meeting would hinder the progress of the project. So we certainly could you guys could certainly take a look at if you wanted to change that number.
Well, could that be done on a project basis? Cause you know, like this one with, you know, the courtroom renovation, as I think about this, is, you know, you had covered areas, and we ran into a few surprises up there that really, quite frankly, you know, it's a lightly documented building, and I'll say that, and we really didn't know. You don't know when you open it up what you're gonna find, and I think sometimes, you know, like on the rails, that could have cost us more money had you not made the decision at that time, because you have the contractors in, they're there templating. You know, I know in my business, if I had to come back, I'd charge you more than if I'm there once doing it, you know, so I think it's the proper decision to get that done. But I just wanna make sure that the process is right, because you don't wanna put it like you're doing something after the fact. It's a little bit concerning to me, but, you know, I think we could see that certainly can happen.
And we've had that structure on previous projects or other similar projects where, you know, most of the, you know, obviously the financial decision comes to the board. I do not want to make that decision on behalf of the county. I think that's not appropriate, but if we had, you know, Nancy or Sherry involved with that decision, What we've done in other projects is basically to set like a limit of, maybe up to a certain amount, and then those can be approved up to, a percentage of the overall contingency for the project, since that's kind of in the county's budget there. And then give you an accounting as we go back, and more or less if we start to bump up against that overall, then we come back and say, here's where we are, have a more in-depth discussion at that point, and you can authorize either to, at that point say, well, no, bring everything to us from here, this point out, or say, okay, we understand where that is, and maybe reset a threshold. If that's something that you'd like, and I could certainly discuss that with Nancy and Sherry, we can set that up for these upcoming projects.
That makes good sense, yeah.
Yeah, I just think is it doesn't change the scope of the project, and it's really kind of, errors and omissions almost, I call it, which you can't see everything. It's not like we're taking x-rays of the building and seeing where everything is. We're not going to that expense up front, so we don't know what we don't know.
Certainly.
And it just makes good common sense to me to be able to give staff, somebody at the staff level, that authority, so you don't bog the wheels down and keep the projects moving.
So that's a kind of a good segue to the next piece of the conversation, is really we're at the end of the project now. It's kind of,
We need to
Let's
take,
vote.
we need to take
Sorry.
action. So,
Do we have a motion on the 3 change orders?
I still had questions.
oh, okay.
So my question is in regards to if Wolf is doing the work, why are we still getting a 15% markup? I thought the markup was because we were having another contractor do the work.
So any change order is going to have basically the base cost plus a markup for the contractor. They still need to get their overhead and profit into that. Essentially, that's just a breakout of the accounting. So Wolf is not work that was in the base portion of the project, so they are entitled to have a overhead and profit as part of any sort of change order, because it's work in addition to the base contract.
Is that a normal percentage that you see? Because I thought normally it was like 10%, but.
I think absolutely, 10 to 15% is certainly, and it's also gonna depend on the size of the change order. If we were looking at maybe a 5-digit change order, I may not be inclined to go with that high, or kind of push back on them, but given the time to do the coordination, the management, and have somebody there to facilitate the work, I think 15% is a reasonable amount of overhead and profit.
Do we ever ask for breakdowns of their numbers? I mean, it just says provide labor and material, but do we ever know that, for example, $5,000 is $3,000 material, is $2,000 labor?
We can certainly ask for that breakout. Typically in the past, we'll review it and see if it seems to be within reason. And depending on, you can see 2 of the change orders have the backup, which would be the other subcontracted work that's coming along with it. We can obviously ask for a more of a breakout. It's just a matter of.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is when they say provide material, I don't know if that's, 30 pieces of 2x4, is that 2 pieces of 2x4? And normally it's usually a threshold. I mean, I'm not saying that 5,000 is enough to where we need to see that, but maybe when we start getting over $10,000, I personally would like to know, are we replacing 32 lights, are we replacing 3 lights? Where do we as a board start asking the contractors to make sure that we're at least informed enough to know what are we buying and what are we getting for a change order? Because if you basically throw all those out, we're already putting in, $15,000, $17,000, $18,000. And none of it tells me how much material nor how much labor. Is it 2 guys for 2 days, or is it 5 guys for a week? Do you understand where I'm getting at?
Certainly, and that'd be.
That's what I guess what I would like to know is, I'm not speaking upon the whole board, but it's from a personal standpoint, if I could see more of what we're getting, that helps us identify really what we're approving versus just material on a change order and labor that doesn't tell me anything other than just a change order. So I think from maybe we talk about that internally, but I think over maybe 10,000, I'd like to start seeing a little bit of a breakdown of really what do we buy, what are we getting, and it doesn't need to be really detailed, but at least to identify five. I mean, just like you did on the other one, 16 window seals. I understand that, but maybe how many is it? Is it a week of labor so I can understand we're paying $85 an hour, or are we paying $55 an hour?
Yeah, I think in some of our past contracts, as I recall, we had, like certain labor categories where we would have an agreed upon, here's our rate if things go above and beyond. I don't know if we did in this contract or not, you know.
We haven't, at this point, we haven't typically, that is not necessarily uncommon to request basically a labor schedule, and then you could use that as a pre-agreed upon labor rate. We haven't written that into contracts. Generally, at this point, if I get a change order, take a look at it and see if it makes sense overall, kind of more from a qualitative standpoint versus getting into a pure quantitative. If that's something that you would like and like to have that breakout,
And
please
so,
let me know. And we'll-
I guess I would like to see more from the future, but I know you know everything, you're already seeing everything, you can look at it and say, yeah, that totally makes sense. But somebody from our perspective on the outside, we have no idea. I mean, we're basically trusting everything that and I trust you, but from a public standpoint, it should be good that we identify what are we doing, how much are we replacing, how much are we approving? And that way we're a little more informed as far as what the change orders are. I guess is all I'm asking for. And that may be just a request back to the contractor and say, hey, can you provide us with a little more detail in these change orders? Because as I'm seeing right here, we're gonna go through another dozen change orders that we've already had. So,
Certainly.
okay.
Nope, I appreciate that, and we'll certainly pass that feedback back, and as we start to get the change orders in, get an opportunity to review them. With these, I can certainly ask Wolf if they would give us some more breakout on that as well.
Thank you.
So do we wanna take these all as one, or do you wanna approve the kind of, the ones that were done and then talk about, or do the additional work as a
We've
separate?
got the three on the table, unless there's any reason to split those up, I just assume do those as a single one.
Yeah, it's all under A for me. I move to approve 5A, 1, 2, and 3. Change orders 7, 8, 9.
Okay, Santos and Scott.
Yeah, Santos moved. I'll second. All right, Scott has seconded. I guess for A, change orders, what, 7, 8, and 9?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, now, do we need to continue on item B? Any further discussion on terms of reviewing the final cost tabulation?
This is more just for your information. I'll just run through this very quickly. So there was some discussion of how do we end up doing overall with what we had projected for the project and where we ended up. The bottom line is we ended up about $55,000 under budget from where we had originally gone in with the project. This is, for those that are watching, change order isn't always necessarily a bad word. So when we went through the tabulation on the overall changes for this project, there were some things that were, either things we discovered, which we know about. There were some things that, were either, a couple of things like the lighting that were just basically misannotated on plan. So those are things that we try to get those pieces out. The other things were upgrades that we decided to make after seeing the ceiling, particularly from the plaster and the paint. There were just some opportunities to enhance the design. So there are good change orders that, really we get more for our money, or we've had the people there. As Jeff said, if we have people on site, why don't we go and take care of these things right now? But all in all, you can see that from the top, we have the design fees would be between myself and then between A&J Associates. We had our contract for the furniture, which was a total of around $50,000 for all the loose furnishing and for the new benches. The original contract with Wolf Construction, and then change orders, which included, we had some extra plaster work, we had some additional, just basically finishes, things like that along the line. We had some modifications to the overall the courtroom bench that was after some of the requests of the state. So again, these are things we were glad to be able to do these things and make sure that we really got that project worked in. Overall, what you can see if you did that, all the change orders, we actually came in underneath the overall contingency that we had set aside, and that's why we kind of go in with the contingency, particularly on a project like this. So basically, there you get down to the end of the project, and overall, we had a 20% contingency set aside of $173,000. Of that, we spent about $120,000. So all current spent is going to be reallocated to other things. But we did end up with a total under budget for the overall that we went into the project with of $55,000. So feeling very good about the way the project worked out, and obviously we take back any sort of the lessons learned of any sort of clerical errors or things like that in our plans and trying to improve the process for the future. Additionally, with the change orders moving into construction management, we'll get that piece tightened up. So I think it's been some really good. This being one of the, I'd say, the first major project we've worked with together. The processes overall moving to the future. And then Sherry included there is that from the overall project standpoint, we had $357,000 you had of historical tax credits, and basically excess general fund or building maintenance set aside of $630,000. So in the end, you county leveraged $50,000 to get $1 million project, so well done.
Well, first is Sherry, Mike, I know who all did all this. This is the first time I've seen something like this from a project, which I love. Because it goes through everything that was approved and done, and I really like the fact that you put funding on there as just kind of a little sunshine on this, so that the taxpayer understand where did this money come from and how was this done? Because this project has been at least 10 years in the thought process, and the board has done, I know prior boards have done things with that tax credit, we got those dollars, and this was always on the wish list to get something like this done, so good job for that. I appreciate seeing that. I was always in the back of my head, I try to figure out where, okay, where are our funding dollars and how did we plan this and where did it come from? So I thank you for putting that together, that's good.
Anyone else? I would also echo that. Congratulations on coming in under budget, and thank you very much for your work on this.
Very much.
Item 5C, discussion and possible action to approve a service order for the jail, partial roof replacement project in the amount of $37,500.
Okay, so I just want to talk through this project a little bit. This is something that was on the capital, so we're looking into now next year's project. From the overall master plan standpoint, we had this slated, maybe 2 to 5 years out. After doing a couple of recent walks to get some patching done, there's also a letter in there for Carlisle about some potential warranty work. It basically came to the conclusion that the roof on that jail, the existing EPDM, which is the black part of the roof, if you look at that, that needs to be replaced sooner than later. So the intent is to get into design, get that project ready to go for bidding in probably late winter, early spring, have that first off of the, as soon as we can get that going in the, starting with next spring. You can see this is a note, we did engage with Carlisle, which is a roofing manufacturer for the newer portion of the roof. There were some portions of the roof that become delaminated. Essentially, it's glued to a substrate below, and there are some areas where that had come up. So what we wanted to do is that had a total roof warranty on it. So we engaged with the Carlisle representatives over the last 6 months. They came out, did an inspection, and what they determined was that it actually was not a failure of their system. It was a substrate board underneath that the top of that peeled off. And they're attributing the likely cause of that to the tornado or to other severe weather. At this point, we don't really have any really way to push back, but I would say the fact they pulled that up and it was actually the cover of that board that sits on top that would come loose really indicates that it's not something we can push onto them for the warranty repair. So their recommendation, you can read through the letter here, was how to get that repaired. So the next step, this would be work that would be done yet this year, is to engage with a roofing contractor who is qualified in the Carlisle system to get that that work completed. And this is something that Sherry and I have talked about overall in the capital improvements, just to give you an overall sense of what's going on with the roof. The remaining roof is all the black, which is on the original portions, I think the portion of the original addition, and that's the portion that we're coming to for the basically the service order to get out to start to survey that roof, take a look at the condition, take a look at the different transitions, all the equipment, and come up with a method to re-roof that portion of the jail. So more or less, my service is here to get out there to do a full survey of everything that's up there. You look at the code requirements, look at, the other thing we'll look at is the FM requirements for the wind rating. I'm not sure exactly what they did on the previous, but we'll review that, basically given current climatology, to make sure that we are designing a roof that's not going to be, basically will meet the level of the winds we're likely to see in the area, so we don't run into the same delamination issues. Essentially document the project, run through the bidding process, and then also provide construction management for that project.
What's the approximate age of that existing roof?
I think the existing roof is well over 20 years old, so it's reached its service life, and what we're seeing is the areas, we worked with Oscar and had a contractor come in and look at a couple areas where they tried to repair.
96.
Yeah, so 21, 22 years old, which is definitely the service life for that type of roof. A couple of areas that need to be patched were, definitely beyond what was within the internal patching to be done. So we have those tidied up, essentially ready to go for the winter, but looking at other seams and other transitions around, it's just a matter of time before we have more serious problems. My strong recommendation is this is one, it's a mission critical facility, so we can't really move people around so much if the roof starts leaking. So we hit it before it becomes a huge issue, but that's definitely something that we have carved out as a project. For
So this was just covered as a part of our site survey, our kind of our overall process, and now so if I understand the recommendation here as we're looking at, I'm a little confused, in the service order, or are we also looking at the patching?
So the patching was done as,
It's already been patched, so we don't have a temporary repair we're trying to effect. We're just saying, do we want to contract the services to go ahead and take this thing out to bid and look at a roof replacement?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was a little confused.
sorry, so there's a little bit of background coming with that. So we did do the patches of the areas that need to be done. That was done at a maintenance budget. The next piece is we do need to go and look at the part that's kind of delaminated, so we'll work that. If that comes under the maintenance budget, then we'll approach that. Otherwise, it'll be under basically a task order for the design and get that portion done. This would be now to jump into another large capital project to do the roof replacement.
And this may be more of a question for Sherry. Sherry, we have this as a part of our capital plan. We may have to pull it forward a couple of years, or do we had this as our budget?
Yes, we had it in the plan, but with the way that the roof has been leaking, there was concern, Oscar had concern, we talked to Mike about, we don't think it's gonna wait a couple more years without causing damage to interior things in the building that will be more expensive to replace in the long run.
And so we have a funding plan for this, roughly.
We have dollars in our building maintenance and repair fund that will cover.
It's what we
this.
did, precisely why we established that and set it for it. Okay. Good?
So, when we brought Carlisle out to look at this, did we have, them come out and they told us that, yeah, it wasn't, nothing from theirs, it was all due to hail? Did we have anybody else verify that, being that they're the party that installed it?
So Carlisle is just the manufacturer, so they would be the one that would have the warranty, not necessarily the installer. We did look through the previous plans. We didn't find a contractor or subcontractor for who did the installation of the roof, but at this point, essentially the warranty would come down to the manufacturer's warranty. Unless we could, if we take it off and we find something different while we're doing the repair, we could certainly try and push back to them. But the fact they came out, they did a couple of core samples. Scott from Maintenance accompanied them while they did that and just looked at that. The fact that they found that the actual, the cover board is most likely, and I asked if they could send us a picture of this, is probably a fiberglass type product that has a surface layer adhered to it with the gypsum and fiberglass. If that came loose from the fiberglass from the gypsum and pulled up, then the glue is still intact. That's what was warranted, essentially the membrane and the glue. It was the substrate that failed. There's not really a whole lot we can do about that.
So did Oscar or somebody else go out there and look at this, is what I'm getting at, beside, or Scott?
Yeah, so Scott from Oscar staff was with them when they did the inspection.
Any questions?
Well, I'd move the approval of the service order to develop plans and specifications for the project.
Is there a second? I would second. Jeff moves, Scott is seconded. Any
Just
further
one,
discussion?
one last question, how much square footage are we talking about for an overall project?
This is over 60,000 square feet. I can get you the exact, it's a very large project.
And we're looking for another membrane roof to go back on?
Yes, we'll have to take a look. Part of this will be to do some core and find out what level of insulation we have, but this project would be to remove, reuse insulation if it's okay. If it's not, we'll have to replace the insulation as well, and then come back with either a new EPDM or TPO membrane product.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
I just have a broad insulation. What would be the situation where the installation would not be okay from water leaks? Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about?
Essentially, a lot of groups will use what's called polyisocyanurate insulation, which absorbs water. So if that gets wet, then it's not going to be providing the same insulation value. So when we start to do our survey, we'll do some cores in a couple of places to see what if that's the type of insulation that's there, and then see what shape it's in. The other thing we would potentially look at is if we need to bring it up to code, if it didn't have enough insulation. currently. We may need to add a little bit of insulation to that. If the insulation is dry and in good shape, we'll just peel off the old membrane and re-roof over top of that, which would be preferable. It would save us, a significant amount of money. If not, we need to replace the insulation. All of that will get torn off back down to the deck, and then we'll reinstall new insulation and new membrane.
That was my point, if you thought that there was more failure than what I was led to believe here in this conversation in regard to possible insulation damage. So, you don't know till you pull it, is that what you're telling me?
Correct, and this is, so then there's two, so there's a new portion of the roof, which is fine, so far as we know, and it won't, the only indication we have there is that the membrane has come loose, so there's no necessarily rips in there. Other places, there have been active leaks, so again, without knowing exactly what that insulation is underneath there, I can't tell you for sure. But that'll be part of, we'll go through the schematic design, figure out what we need to do, put an overall number to it, and that's kind of what we'll come up with the budget.
And as a part of this project, like we've had problems with parapets and stuff in the past, are we gonna review those and look at the condition and
Yep.
if any work that gutters and a curb and anything up there that would require attention, we'll go after?
Absolutely, everything roof related, so that's gonna be the parapets, the copings, the flashings, and that's where the insulation question really comes in, because if we need to upgrade insulation, we need to find out what thickness we need to go to. And then also, it kind of ties back to where the roof drains are, whether we actually need to replace or change any of the flashings, particularly on the transitions. We have areas that step from lower to higher roofs. We have the mechanical penthouse up there. There's a lot going on, so excited.
Are we in good enough condition to go through this winter?
I think it is okay for this winter, and I would almost say that it doesn't really matter, because we would not be able to get the project executed in time to start before the winter. So with the patches that we did, we hit.
That's what I was getting at. Did we do enough patches to where we're gonna be sufficient, or we feel comfortable?
Yeah, so we're confident. I would say that last year we did have the issues when we had big snowpacks and we had fast melt off, that we did have some overflow around the edges just due to the snowpack. We'll have to see how that goes this year. Again, that was more of a climate related issue. But again, we'll talk with Oscar, make sure that all the roof drains, the overflows are all cleared out, ready to go, and that'd be the best thing we can do to get ready for the winter.
Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so the last piece I would like to discuss today is the other project we're working on, which is the additions and minor renovations to the deputies' quarters out on Park Avenue. I sat and had great input from Captain Slade and also from Lieutenant Quinn, Lieutenant Reese, going through and developing an overall what is the master plan of what we'd like this facility to be, with the understanding that this was a project that we picked up this year to get everything in addition to the maintenance, get everything moved out of the Washington Street, the work release facility, so that we can make decisions on what to do with that for the future. So what we came out to was we had some things in the master plan that we put together. We had input and the overall with that, which was to add on storage, new evidence handling facility, and then garage space for basically to store for deputies' cars to go during inclement weather. That was what we put into the master plan based off of input from the sheriff's department, and we had a total of about $300,000 budget set aside for that. So what we're going to do today is discuss the schematic design. And Sherry and I sat and talked through budget to see where we are with the projects we had in process, with the projects we have coming up, and also what's available with the building maintenance fund to see really where we could be with this project and kind of suggest a path forward. So without going too far into this, and again, this is the best guess at this stage of the game. So there's some linear footage takeoffs and square footage takeoffs. I wouldn't read too much into the exact descriptions. It's more to kind of get an idea of where the overall budget is right now. I'm going to flip to the plan so those who are in the audience have a chance to see what we're looking at here. The idea here was to, when we put together all the work we wanted to do, we came out to about $600,000. Given that we had about a $300,000 budget, what we did was came up with a phasing plan, and that's what I wanted to discuss with you today to see what pathway we want to have moving forward. So more or less, you can see that this is the area. If you're familiar with the Park Avenue facility, there's the sheriff's quarters, the entrance, and kind of the bubbled, the red area is where we're looking to do the addition. We looked at going potentially to the other side, but due to drainage, some concerns from the county engineers, paving of that parking lot, we felt like it actually would be better to go this direction. It also makes more sense with the flow of the building overall. So that's kind of the area we're looking at for the phase one. So essentially what we're looking at with phase one would be to pick up the things that we address in a master plan, which would be the 2-stall garage place for the patrol vehicles to sit there in inclement weather, to have some occasional use for minor maintenance. And then also in the plan here is to revise the evidence holding. This was to get climate controlled for firearm storage, and then also to get a separately ventilated space for sort of narcotics and other noxious types of things, and just have general evidence storage there. One thing that we also did, kind of looking at this in a phase one, phase two, what would be very good to have in the short term is to put some basement space underneath that, to basically have general storage, which would be things that are currently stored in the mezzanine area over top of the garage space down in the work release. So that's kind of the, what I would say, the phase one. The phase two, the addition to that would be, you can see what we had in phase one, which is the same storage space there. The other things that we looked at were the vehicles and some of the kind of nice to haves that are currently stored down the work release facility. So there is an SUV with a large boat, which would be kind of the deep bay to the planned bottom. Another 2-bay, or a wider bay to store the other boats that are there. And then the one thing that came up as a nice to have for the future would be a bay with a lift for doing some temporary evidence storage. They have larger vehicles and things like that to do inspections they have from time to time. So that was something that we discussed. So that's kind of the phase two. Again, this will all be done at once, just a question of where the budget sit. And in discussion with Sherry, going back to the $300,000 we have this year, this is what we could do to get ready, or essentially get this project ready to go first thing in the spring with the phase one.
Hey, Mike, the phase 1 and 2, is that entire footprint, or is that?
This would be the phase 1 and 2, so the entire footprint there.
Okay, so really the red area is still the same, then it looks like you had some paving or something.
Correct. So the topography at that point, as you start to go, that drops off about 4 feet down the hill there. So what you'd be looking at is kind of a mid-level for the phase two. So drop down to basically keep that along with the terrain. One of the questions that we discussed with the city was potentially adding another entry over here. We can see it says new driveway on Park Avenue. That fairly got shot down. They said we could go as far as the edge, but they didn't want to add another driveway there. So the idea would be essentially to place a pull in there so you could pull a trailer in and back into the space.
Why are they opposed to another driveway?
They're concerned about the number of driveways that are there, the separation, and the traffic along Park Avenue.
Park Avenue West.
Yes, sir.
There's not even any cars
Who's the
that
they?
go by them.
They would be initial conversations with the city planner and the city engineer.
There's almost no traffic on it.
Oh, I know. Don't get me started.
It's all the county, it's probably.
Yeah, it's our
Sheriff's
traffic.
office, highway department's all the traffic, over on a little bit over there. Okay, how far apart are those entrances, 60, 80 feet? Oh, you got the number, I just can't read
Yeah,
it.
so we're about
70 feet.
67 feet from edge to edge. It's something we can take up as we go. There is a workable solution either way.
I mean, really, that, because you've got trailers and such that they need to get in and out of there with, and there would be, the only other choice would be to spin the garage, right, which you probably don't have the frontage for, the room for.
It would certainly be possible. You can see the two, where it's the double dash there, the thick dashed line there is a setback to where we could build a little footprint. Again, to put a garage up on grade there, the amount of fill we would need seems to be, I didn't run a number on that. We could certainly look at that and see what the difference is, but that seemed to be a lot more work and potentially cost prohibitive to basically to fill in this entire area with 4 feet of fill all the way around to put an on-grade garage.
Santos, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mike. The city has traffic studies on all these roads, right?
Correct.
Could you request the traffic study numbers for West Park Avenue, the most recent ones for us? Thank you.
Maybe there's another conversation about that situation that you had official.
I think the city could.
On these plans, Mike, are we doing anything with the street appeal of that facility?
Doing the best we can with it. Again, at this point, given the budget that we have with the phase one and phase two, we're gonna focus primarily on these addition pieces here. So we'd had discussions, it'd be very nice to reside, to reduce and things like that with the building. Again, given the budget that we have for this year, what I'm coming to is here's what we have to work with to start with. Certainly, these are things that we can address for the long term, and there are things that can be done there. That's probably a larger conversation, so.
Well, I would prefer to see a holistic plan with, that facility's always driven me crazy. It looks like we moved in a mobile home and put our sheriff's office in it. I just don't like it. Sorry if I offend somebody who lives in a mobile home, but it just doesn't look like a professional office environment for an organization like that. And I'd like to see if we can clean that space up and have that be a nice addition to the neighborhood. And I would just want to understand what the funding requirements for that would be, so as we go through this, because even if we phase this, I mean, have you looked at what the incremental cost would be versus phasing if we tried to take the whole project on? How much difference would that do? Because you're gonna have to remobilize, you've probably got a lot of excavation and dirt work we're gonna have to do. Seems to me you're probably over excavating in this area, and then if you come back in 2 years, 3 years from now, how much is, are we wasting we're gonna have another $20,000 in excavation fees? Because most of this is driven by concrete costs, right?
Absolutely, so the phase 2 addition portion is just basically concrete, yeah.
It's all concrete.
Yeah. Again, that's more of a budget question, and I'm not gonna say what Sherry threatened she'd do to me, but I think we need to have that discussion. Certainly there is some value of doing it that way, but based off of what we have, my understanding, what we had arranged to borrow for this year, this is what we have budgeted for the project right now, will get us this far with it.
And so back to some of the use, I've been through the Washington facility, so does this address all the issues we have down there in the storage? Because I've been up in the kind of hinterlands, and then I know we have, is that the notion of the lift? So some of the squad car maintenance, some of the work we do down in that site, that takes care of those issues pretty well.
So right now, if we have a vehicle that we need to process for evidentiary purposes, we go to Midtown and we store a vehicle on a lift down there for a number of days. We don't have a truly secure location to do those.
No, they have not specifically charged us for that, but I almost feel, right, they could at any time, and I almost feel like we continue to take advantage of them for something that we should be taking on ourselves. And it's been, well, we've been out there since '95 as well, so Midtown has been doing this for us. And sometimes we ask Keith if we can take a car in and use his building as well. It just kind of felt like when Mike came to us, we weren't asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars, we were just asking for the things that we thought we needed to run the business in the way that it should be run.
Well, I'm concerned that it would need to be in a secure area because it is evidence, and I think that's an important factor here too. Okay.
It doesn't need to be any specific type of lift, I wouldn't think. I mean, lifts are not necessarily very expensive.
And what we talked about was the 4-post dry along lift. That's easy to operate. You don't have to worry about having the vehicle balanced properly and potentially dropping it or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why that discussion came up. And we went that route rather than the 2-post.
I understand that.
So we had a lift
You're dealing with
over
$5,000.
Washington.
Right.
Yeah, if you find use for
It's
15, 18.
We're not dealing with a whole lot of money to solve your issue.
Correct.
I think kind of what we're looking for today is, Mike and I have talked about this, but it's not my decision whether we wanted to just replace the work release center space for the $300,000 that we borrowed to do that this year, or if we want to spend into our building fund and do the whole thing at once. That's a board decision, and I think that's what you guys need to be thinking about. Right, Mike, that's what we need to know.
Yes, I think that's more or less where we are in the conversation, and I would say the other piece of that is we talked about the other major, what we didn't want to do was spend any money twice, so that's when we talked about the roof on the jail. That's kind of what's, when we discussed it and set aside the building repair fund, and that would be, at this point, as I understand it, that's where additional funds would come from, so we did get a little bit of that money.
And it would use most of that fund probably for this, but we can replenish that money, just like we have been.
Right. I think I would, me personally, I would like to see this kind of, I don't like to dibble dabble in this stuff. I think it makes sense to go in, get it done, do what you wanna do, and let's look at the funding separate, as a separate discussion. What would it take to do it right, do it once, just get it over with. And then we'll, figure out the funding and, understand we have to deal with the roof, but that's why we plan, right? That's why we have these and we do these surveys, we have a plan so that this board can look at that and look at our future funding needs and make sure we're in good shape. And then, this is kind of an aside, but then this is the last, with the building, with the maintenance facility, and then this piece is the last kind of bastion of Washington Street, right? Then we've got Washington Street abandoned, basically. And I would like to see like maybe maybe that's outside of this, if we have this budget discussion, I would like to see like a demolition plan for Washington Street, or something. What are we gonna do with Washington Street? I don't think the county has any beneficial use for it, we don't have a need for it.
Sell
It's in a floodplain, do we make it for sale as is, do we demo it and sell it, or, what's the kind of best thought there? Do we have interested parties? I mean, Eric, it's gonna have some restrictions on what you could even do there, right? Has limited use?
As limited use, but I think it's a conversation we're having with the city to talk about taking a second look at an entrance that we may want on the street there, because that may be a very valuable property to the public works and storage lot, something like that. Something else I want.
I think we should put that for another agenda and
Yeah.
have staff reach out and look at that. I have a few questions just in regards to, how much square footage are we gonna have for vehicle space versus office space that we're requesting in both phases?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
How much space are we gonna have? Are we putting in, 5-car garage on both of them to take up 25,000 square feet? Are we putting in, 10,000 office space? How much square footage are we putting in for vehicle storage versus actual office space?
So we're not adding any office space, this is all vehicle and storage space, so what we'd have would be the original, or this phase one, as recommended with the 2-bay, would be around 700 square feet of garage space, and then that's gonna be about another 500 or 600 square feet of evidence storage space on the main floor, with, then adding about 500 square feet of general storage space in the basement underneath that, so total of that addition would be around 1,800 square feet. And for the other portion of phase two, actually, let's see, probably got a quantity here. We have about 2,300 square feet of space, and that would be for the deep bay, to keep the SUV and the boat connected, and then to have the other, the vehicle storage here, and then to have the, basically the evidence / vehicle inspection bay.
And this is sheriff's office equipment, search and rescue stuff is gonna be housed in the addition on the bay there.
That's correct, this is all for sheriffs.
So 2,300 overall?
2,300 for phase two, yes, and then 1,800, give or take, for phase one.
So about 4,800 total.
Yeah, it's a little slight change, yes.
When would you be thinking about doing this work?
This is depending on where we want to go with this. This will be a spring project. I would say at this point, this is definitely a spring project, given the timeline, the timeframe, continued development, availability of consultants. I would not recommend trying to get this project started this year. So the timeline would be to wrap up design and get this ready for bidding in late winter, early spring. So we basically hit the ground in April, May timeframe, depending on when we start to get foundations in.
And as I recall, some of that evidence storage area, we've got some special fire suppression, HVAC kind of air quality issues we gotta deal with in there.
Primarily the air quality and then the humidity issues, so having it, pardon me, humidity storage or controlled storage for the firearms, and then for the narcotics and the other noxious type of evidence, having that direct vented, so it's not going through sealing. Yep. So we can proceed with this. So again, we're just more or less, this is conversation, not necessarily action through its schematic design. So the suggestion would be to proceed with developing this as the entire project to see what that looks like from a budget standpoint if we did everything. The other piece that we'll have to look at before this project or the jail roof project go out is we'll have the two of those budgets to look at side by side. And then see where do we actually sit with that. And I think we would look into this probably after next year, February timeframe. We can have those two things and then take a look at where the budget sits with the overall, what's left in the maintenance repair fund to make a decision on whether this needs to be a phased project. Again, what I wanted to do was bring you today an option of here's what we can get done was in the master plan for the amount that we set aside. However, I think in conversation, there are certainly things in the entire project that would be a benefit. And I think would be a good investment.
What kind of a time span are you talking between phase one and phase two, that way?
That would totally depend on the budget. So at whatever point you said, yep, we have the money available for phase two, that would be, I think we would go with that. So phasing is, if we can bring the budget together, then phasing is not necessarily it works, and I think we can have two discrete projects that work here together. With the phase two, what I would say is we can get everything put together and get it designed. We can proceed that direction, and what we'll do is if we need to, we'll just break out a phase one package and then have a phase two package ready to go for when that funds become available.
Jeff, that if he's putting together one comprehensive project, do you want the aesthetics, the building aesthetics included in that?
I think we should look at it, because,
Line item it out.
in my mind, that whole setup out there in the engineer's office, we haven't talked about that, but that's part of our long-term discussion too, is proper office space for zoning and engineering, and, they're kind of all living in pole barns now, and how do we?
That's in our master plan,
That's in
isn't
our
it?
master plan, I know, I just wanna look at that whole campus and make sure that it's a good long-term facility for use.
So I would say based off of, again, it's not necessarily action, but based off of the conversation we've had here today, is we will continue to develop this project. So what I wanted to have a sense for was before I went to my consultants and got the engineering portion put together, they know what they're working on. So we will plan to develop the project as a whole, and then we'll come back here in a few months when we get closer to letting the project for bid, and we'll discuss where budgets sit with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just had one last question. Do we plan on doing any security around this? I mean, is there any cameras, any concrete versus walls versus wood siding or brick? Is there any of that included in what you're proposing?
We don't have any particular security requirements. We did discuss that, whether we need to do any special construction. I think that the consensus was that as long as we do good, solid, code approved construction, there shouldn't be any need for additional security in a place like this, sheriff's office. So from overall monitoring standpoint
We
and
have
that.
some security cameras out there now.
Right, and they would cover the parking lot, our front door, Keith and Eric's front door. The only thing that the security camera or system currently would not cover would be, those front doors that would face Park Avenue West. We should be able to see, because you can see everything coming in the driveway. And JJ Kohler put that in for us, and I'm sure adding an additional camera to that east side would not affect either the storage capabilities of the server, or, obviously you're gonna have to pay for a camera and somebody to install it, but it's not, I think our new, right, I don't think that that's a dollar amount that,
Okay. I just asking when we're starting to say we're having this much footage, don't know if we're having internal cameras as well too, with beings that we're putting all the evidence and
we
whatnot.
don't have any internal cameras inside the office. We did talk about, with Mike, and part of this project is key to our evidence, because we don't have that now either in the trailer that we live in. But the card reader would allow us to document who goes in and who goes out and how long that they're in there, and that was something that we did talk about too.
And refresh my memory, I know we had issues with the vestibule entry to the sheriff's office. Have we addressed that, or is that a different project? Are we doing something there, or is that something that should be?
The door has been bad for over a year, and we fixed it, and then it, goes on the bricks and it stands open again. It seems like fall, when the weather starts changing, it will stand open, and for some reason our guys can't figure out they need to shut the door when you when you leave for customers. So it does stand open. Oscar's been great in trying to come out and fix it and keep it working for us. But that was part of the project. We did talk to Mike about that and getting a new door there as well.
That'd be part of the next is we were looking at the overall, the mechanical systems of the building, so understanding what's going on with that vestibule and conditioning, whether it's a climate issue or if there's something potentially with the foundations of that. So that's in the kind of schematic onto the finer points of the project.
To me, that would get to that whole point of the facade, and, let's put a proper entrance in with, defined entrance so people know where they're supposed to go, where they're supposed to park, all that kind of stuff, and maybe you could address it at that time. I'd just like to see that if we, we do something with this building, let's just make sure we do it once.
Do these two phases cover all the needs that the sheriff's department needs to have out there? I mean, there's a difference between needs and wants, of course. But, does that cover all the needs that they have out there? I mean, with both these phases, to me, it looks very practical to me. It'll also take care of the Worthington Street issue down there.
Well, I thought at one point we talked about we had additional vehicle storage somewhere, because I thought at one point we looked at a plan where we had maybe a lean-to garage or something similar that went down the parking lot that they share with the
On the west
engineer's
end?
office.
On the west end?
Yeah, and I don't know what the status of that is, or is that,
You guys said no.
Yeah, I think we discussed that as part of the master plan, we decided that was not. So what this will do is take the vehicles that are currently stored inside down in the work release facility and replace that. And the addition, so the additional space, that would be more or less this space here of these two garages. Will cover we could take the bottom of the L. The additional, from the conditioned garage space for the, basically inclement weather for the deputies' vehicles. And then the lift bay would be some things that, this was all part of the master plan, and then this was things that I would say didn't get addressed as part of the master plan, but I would say are necessary.
And as far as more garage storage, I just really don't think it's necessary. We do have some extra cars that are out back, the sheriff's patrol vehicle or a truck that we have if we need to move evidence or whatever. If the weather is so inclement that, the car is full of ice, we've always found a way to bring it down to the jail and thaw it out. But that's what we were asking for here. Just let us thaw our own cars out here, get them taken care of, and then we can get them back. They can sit outside, they're fine. Most of our cars, even though they're operated and taken home from the office, probably sit outside. But we're just looking for some place to thaw out vehicles when we need to use the extra vehicles that are sitting out back. I don't think we needed, the thing that you did not approve, that would be just fine. I mean, you're right, between wants and needs, yeah. Would we take one? Sure, but do we need it? Probably not.
Yeah.
I would just,
I like the overall of this. I certainly would take an open up conversation with the city in regard to that of the driveway. I think that's very important in my mind. It would be very beneficial to everyone involved. And I certainly open up that conversation again. Maybe take a look at that.
will do.
All right, I think you're off the hook for now.
Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. And just a quick update, so we started to work with Swanson is getting all their I's dotted and T's crossed. We'll have a schedule hopefully sometime this week, so within the next week or so, we'll be able to sit down and talk about time frame and timeline to get started on the maintenance facility. So thank you very much, I appreciate your time.
Item number 6 is discussion with Community Services Director and Disability Services Coordinator Felicia Toppert regarding funding reduction decisions made by the Eastern Iowa Mental Health and Disability Services Region at the meeting last September 23rd on Monday.
I'm the bearer of bad news
Good.
today. I just wanted to go over with you a little bit the budget cuts that had to be done last Monday. These budget cuts were done in front of providers, client advocates, so it was a very emotional meeting. The cuts are necessary just to make budget for this year. So rather than going through one by one, I'm gonna kind of give you a general overview. They cut programs that either hadn't been implemented or hadn't been utilized. That's one chunk of programming. They took out training that could be delayed down the road when we have more money. Bridge appointments were a very big cut to the tune of $87,500. And those bridge appointments are appointments where we can get consumers in immediately to see a doctor and get medication started for them or restarted, whichever the case may be. And so those are going to be cut back. Although Robert Young tells us that bridge appointments that they can make, they can do some shifting to make that work. The other thing that went out was the ACQ, which is a social worker for Jackson County. So we're going to go about the process of sharing a social worker. So the social worker that's here may go up and help out Clinton or Jackson County when they need help. In those particular areas, the regional crisis services, we're talking about cutting $323,234. That's a pretty big cut. Health homes was also cut, but that was a program that just wasn't even utilized. Vera French agreed to a capitated rate for their med management in Scott County. So their capitated rate gave us a cut of about $200,000. And the discussion kind of was, do people really need to have daily med management, or do they need a different level of service? So the other thing that was really an important cut in my mind that gave us a cut of $281,025 was Vera French's Peer Drop-In Center. Their drop-in center had a number of staff in there that were Medicaid reimbursable. Unlike our Peer Drop-In Center, which is not like that, or Clinton's, which is not like that. It was a lot of medical personnel in there. So that got cut. And now they're down to a peer drop-in center that's very similar to the one that's MCSA. So you have people who can just drop in who are not feeling very good or are just basically saying, I just need somewhere to go for today. And being able to drop into the peer center anytime they want to and be able to talk to somebody, and if there's more services needed, they can be referred from there. So, and Scott will talk a lot more about that. The other thing that got cut to the tune of $250,000 was sheltered workshops. In Muscatine, that means that Crossroads is going to take a pretty significant financial hit. And we've known for 5 years that the federal government was saying you need to get rid of these and you need to get those folks out into the community in supported employment. And the state didn't even budget money for sheltered workshops. And our region is the only region that's been funding sheltered workshops over the course of the last 2 years. And that money is a pretty significant chunk of change. And so the sheltered workshop providers are in varying stages of moving folks to sheltered employment or supported employment. And Jackson County in particular has moved away from that sheltered workshop model to supported employment. And HDC, the Handicap Development Center in Scott County, has moved over toward an enterprise where their folks are getting paid minimum wage and doing the work that they're doing now. So Crossroads is, and none of the shelter workshops are going to have any funding from the region effective FY '21. So, they have got to, Crossroads in particular, in very short order, is gonna have to do some pretty significant changes to get that ball rolling. Now,
If I could interject there.
please do.
I'd like you to just describe a little bit about that wasn't just funding that had been approved, that was part of the one-time grant that hadn't been spent on time. If you wanna elaborate on that a
Yep.
little bit.
And that was the other piece that the board had to make a decision about. There were one-time grants given to agencies. And most of the agencies spent their one-time funding within the time frame of FY '19. There were 2 agencies that did not, one being Crossroads. And the board agreed to claw back that money that they did not spend. And that money was slated to be for hiring folks to start the process of getting folks into supported employment. And they did not do that. They didn't spend that money, so it is being brought back to the region to balance that budget. That cover it?
Sounds great.
I've had discussions with Goodwill, in terms of their activities in the community. They do a lot of supported employment. They don't do any workshop anymore. And, they're more than willing to, have any conversation that Crossroads is willing to have in terms of either taking on consumers that they may be able to help with, like right away, immediately, to get those off of Crossroads' plate, or any kind of mentoring that they can do, they're more than willing to do. Supported employment in Muscatine, in my mind, is really a good thing. Muscatine has an awful lot of manufacturing. Crossroads does work for Han. And Crossroads could talk to Han about doing an enclave, and an enclave is basically 6 to 8 consumers that do the work within the facility. So they may have a space right off of a line, and they do all the things they do now, but they actually are able to walk those parts into the factory and hear from factory workers, thank you so much for doing all that, and actually get paid minimum wage. And there are a lot of places around Muscatine that an enclave would work really well. And enclaves are paid for by Medicaid. They're not paid for by region dollars, they are not paid for by county dollars. And I think that's a really good move. It's going to really put some pressure on the MCOs to be able to get those folks up and running, but I think it's worth the time and worth the effort to do that. And Goodwill has some great success stories, if you ever want to drop by and talk to them about it, in terms of people that they never thought would be working independently, that are working independently now. They do great work. So, the other thing that occurred is there's effectively a moratorium on any more sheltered workshop clients being funded. So anybody new is gonna be denied funding for sheltered workshop. Any new referrals for transportation or community support program, that community support program is only in Scott County. Transportation, we do a lot of. We have to put new referrals for folks that are developmentally disabled or brain injured on a waiting list, because there's no funding for that. And any individuals who are currently getting transportation or community support programs, we can't add any more dollars or hours or anything to their particular program. One of the things that we've been doing in the office in anticipation of this over the course of the last probably 3 weeks is we've been looking at every client that we serve. And there are quite a number of folks that we don't have any eyes and ears on. And my term of eyes and ears is there's no case manager, there's no person going to their case planning and that kind of thing to actually get a handle on, is that person getting the service they need from the county? Because the county's paying the bill. The question is the service the right amount of service that they should be getting? So, there have been some things that are on automatic pilot that we're taking off of automatic pilot. And the agencies have been told that they have to get me progress reports for those clients. that void is kind of all about case management. When case management went away, a lot of these clients just wound up going on automatic pilot in terms of county funding. So we're looking at that as we speak. I think some really great things that I've found is that our guardianship, conservatorship, payee program does more to keep people stable than virtually any program I've ever seen. They really have an interest. They can tell you anything about that client. They budget for that client. That client remains stable. We have a very low rate of hospitalization, commitment, all those kinds of things that are high dollar items when we have those services in place. Because those social workers are keeping track. And if something starts to happen, they hear from the provider and they're able to intervene in that process. And very frankly, that's not necessarily a core service. And in 21, the region's gonna be down to core service. And that's one of those things I really, really do not want to lose in that process. We have housing program and some of those kinds of things that Scott and I believe have huge potential for helping people to remain more stable in the community and cost the county less money by being stable. So, and I've got a great staff and I'm still coming back. And that's always a surprise for everybody. Oscar said, you know, you better ask Sherry about that. If you don't come back tomorrow, she's gonna be really upset with me. And I said, I'm coming back tomorrow, so you don't ever have to worry about that. So is there anything else that I can, do you have any questions?
Just a couple other issues I'd love for you to touch on. Where these budget cuts put us in terms of the cash flow issue in next fiscal year, as well as that $311,000 gorilla in the room.
Okay. Go. I'm just gonna be full of good news.
I need you to do this. So we
I
have to,
know.
right?
According to budget projections from David Farmer, if budget projections hold true and we turn over $311,000 of our tax dollars from Muscatine, we will have $58,670 left,
Fund balance.
fund balance. Now, according to 2080, the fund balance, this fund balance doesn't even come close to what it would require for us to turn those dollars over. And what I mean by that is it's excess funding. So we're allowed to have a 40% fund balance. So if we leave the 311,000 in there, we might get close to that 40% fund balance. So I think that's a discussion the regional board needs to have, is about that 2080 language before anybody does anything. They need to have that very frank conversation about, the 2080 says this, here's where we are, what do we do from there? And just so you know, the budget balance that we're supposed to have is gonna be a negative 391,000. Even if we put the money back in, we're not gonna be able to get it back out again for services based on the projected budget that we have.
So I think that 58,000 approximately we have left represents something like a 3% fund balance.
Yes, 3.2.
And so I've told the region, don't count on that money. I've said it for the last several months. David Farmer has nevertheless put it in the budgets. And this what was the total amount of cuts? In excess of $1 million that we looked at
Yes.
last week. This amount of money was not to balance the budget. It was simply to make it possible for the region to cash flow from July 1 to September 30th next year. Because it's still vastly overspent. So the region wants us to kick in $311,000 so that it can maintain roughly an 11% fund balance. And I pointed out that it's a little silly to have us, Muscatine, transfer 311 to the region so it can maintain an 11% balance when that knocks us down to 3. And David Farmer's response is, yes, I understand that, but you could ask for it right back.
took that out of the current year budget.
Yes.
That 311,000 was requested as part of the budget, and that was
We
reviewed.
decided that at the beginning of the year.
That we weren't gonna pay that, so we'd have a budget issue if we did that.
Exactly. Precisely what I've been telling you.
We said at the time, when I gave you guys the numbers, that we can't pay him $311,000, so we took it out of
Right.
the budget, so.
And his response is, well, you just ask for it right back. The problem with that is,
They don't have it to give back.
exactly, and it's gonna require a vote of 4 other counties to give it back. So we would essentially be turning over Muscatine taxpayer funds to the mercy of 4 other counties, which I'm not comfortable with, to say the least. So, I asked Felicia to re-emphasize that to the board here so that we can, be reminded of that, and, we're gonna get some heat for that. All the other counties are gonna call us mean and nasty. They've already started. The providers are gonna call us mean and nasty, and that's already started, but we don't have it. The region doesn't have it, and that's why we're in a position. And one thing I will expand on that is in my mind, and tell me if you disagree with me, Felicia, the prevailing attitude at the region has been, well, the legislature is going to see what kind of a financial strait we're in, and they're gonna ride to the rescue at the last minute with some sort of a code change. Now, their attempts to do that so far have been ham-handed at best. I don't see them doing that, and in speaking with several legislators, here's the problem. When the laws change, the first change required the region to spend down its fund balance very quickly. Our region, perhaps responsibly, perhaps naively, decided to actually do that, to obey the law. None of the other regions in the state went ahead with that. So we knocked down our fund balance, and then all the other regions complained that, hey, we're not gonna be able to do that. The legislature then changed the law and said, okay, well, you don't have to knock down your fund balance. So here we are with a knockdown fund balance. All of a sudden, they're telling us, well, you could have saved that money. And so last February, proposals were made for $1.3 million of grant funding by the region to supposedly one-time requests. That was a 3-2 vote that ultimately approved it. I was not one of the 3. But that was frustrating, I think, to some of our legislators who shared that with me, because by the time we approved that in May, the law was about to change to allow our fund balance to remain high. And according to legislatures, we knew or should have known that that was going to change, and so we were irresponsible in giving that money out. Whether that's true or not, and I make no comment on that, whether that's true or not, the fact is we are in a situation that is unique to other regions, in that we don't have the fund balance to continue to fund ourselves. We've given out a lot of one-time grants, so there's not a lot of pity or impetus to move in our favor. Meaning, I rate the chances of a legislative save at the 11th hour as between slim and none. Any quibble there?
None at all.
I agree with that. I spoke with our legislative body, and they
Yeah.
have the same. You know, the challenge to me is, you know, this is for our delegation to this region board, is that the same group that continues to give us poor fiscal advice at the region level is the same group that has put us into this position. And they're, again, for how many years have we been regionalized? 5 years? They're always waiting for the Hail Mary from the state. Yeah, it ain't gonna happen. And, you know, so the bottom line is, you know, Scott County needs to find some money and put it into the region, because they're the ones that have created this mess.
And I think
Period.
that for us, all options need to be on the table. And I've mentioned that to Felicia, whether it makes sense to look at the content of the region, whether we should continue to be a part of it, whether there are other regions we could be a part of. I don't know. I absolutely don't know. But these are, given the dire state of things, these are options that have to be at least looked at.
Well, I'm not willing to send money to the region, because it's been written on the wall since the day they did all this stuff. It's been foolish, and, you know, I'm pretty much over the region.
Well, we tried to get our $3 million back. We only were able to get about 700,000.
Yeah, we've already sent 303 million Muscatine tax dollars to that region, but they've spent, you know, it's not gonna happen. not on my watch. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we become our own region.
Well, Jackson County is the only county that's gonna be at 40%. All the other counties are gonna be in the same exact dilemma that we're in. If they give their money over, if they turn it all into the region, they're still gonna be short.
Yep.
And that's what really needs it needs to be a very frank conversation with the regional board and looking forward. And if I were picking and choosing, I'd like them to do at least a 3-year plan for how they're going to financially function and not just go at it 1 year at a time and not just go at it one piece of legislation at a time.
Right. Because we're spending 12 million and we're only taking in 9.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Felicia, but even if we paid the 311 and the other counties do too, they're still in a negative fund balance. The region
Yes.
still, that doesn't
Yes.
fix it.
No, it doesn't. So,
And what, the Muscatine, on Muscatine County residents' behalf, what is our annual spend?
In terms of what we spend just annually,
Yeah,
we have 1.5 million and change
okay.
that we're getting out of the region. So that could be crisis services, it could be all kinds of things.
So as I recall, you know, we originally were about 1.9, we were levying and doing.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. I think you're talking about what
That's
what
what we do.
services we get from the region. The county budget that we're spending is 1.3 million, probably.
so we're right in, per capita, the Muscatine portion of it is about 35 bucks a head, I wanna say. We're allowed to levy $30.68. When you factor in region expenditures, if we could, what's the number, if we could fully fund, it would be something like 47, or was it 42? I can't remember.
43 something.
43, okay. So, we're not, I mean, the levy issue is an issue, because we can't even fund ourselves with the levy, let alone the region.
Which
But-
has been the problem from day one.
Which has been the problem, but it's one that we've seen coming and we've exacerbated by by spending like this. That's the problem when you're in a group of 4 other people. You don't have total control.
What's the downside to be a region of 1?
I don't think you're allowed to.
That would be the downside.
Yeah.
Well,
There are a couple, right?
Polk
technically,
is, right?
technically you are allowed to, but you have to have all the criteria required by a region.
Right.
So you have to be in proximity to a mental health center, a proximity to a federally qualified health center, that sort of thing. So a lot of it has to do with proximity. And your ability to carry out all the core functions. You have to prove that you can do all of that, the same as a region can.
And that may or may not be possible.
Right, well, it just, so much of this just doesn't make any sense. You share everything, you have nothing, and everybody's starving to death.
It's like communism. Excuse me.
Starving to death in the sense of need, not physically starving, but starving to death in the sense of need. Your hands are so often tied that you can't do the right thing.
And that's one of the reasons that my staff and I are looking at all those clients that we don't have eyes and ears on. And we take them off of automatic pilot and see where we are, really.
So are there clients in this group, and just my number's a little, you know, are these only ID waiver people? Or we're talking, we provide these services beyond that scope?
Well, we provide services beyond ID waiver.
So do we know how many, how many county residents are we servicing, do you know, providing through the mental health region? Do we have an idea of that number, Felicia?
No, but I can find out. Just through the region,
Yeah.
okay?
I mean, this all, you know, this is all just perplexing to me. It's, you know, I've long said I wasn't a big proponent of the regionalization. I was wrong. It's brought some advantages. But the bottom line is, you know, the issue was always, you know, and We learned that early on with the region. It's always been a shell game, you know. Scott County was leveling and only levying $14 a thousand for mental health services. Well, that's wrong, because they were grant funding their sheltered workshop out of another pie, and they were, you know, so nobody really knew what they were spending. And I think the state study said it was $55 per capita. I think we were in that range is what we were spending, or our levy was. And you know, so they come in and they cut us to 30, and you know, when they were hoping for 50, it's like, by what method, you know? The whole system was underfunded by 20 million going into this thing, and they've done nothing but cut funding, and it doesn't, I don't know why you just, I don't get it. I don't get it. The math is not that hard.
Well, and if you look at the map for the whole state, there's different levies all over the state.
Sure, I understand when you sit in Des Moines, you mandate services in southwestern Iowa, southeastern Iowa, where you have a low population base. And we're reasonably blessed in that we have a decent, you know, population evaluation. But go to a county that doesn't have that. You know, it's onerous to say that you got to do all, you know, all these services you have to provide. I get the problem, but their solution just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I'm a pretty good fan of sheltered workshops. I think the thing that everybody forgets is we have individuals that have such profound issues that you're never gonna integrate them into a normal work environment. It's just not gonna happen. And if you don't believe that, go out and work at Crossroads for a week or so. Go spend a day on the floor. And you know, they receive value and self-worth by doing that. So I have trouble when we say, you know, to me, it's how do we provide them with a good quality of life at the lowest potential cost to the taxpayer? And I'm not sure we're thinking about that as we're going forward, you know.
Well, it's one of the reasons that I have kind of pushed Crossroads to really evaluate and assess their folks and find out who needs to go to Dayhab. They might not be able to go to shelter workshop, but they can go to Dayhab, which is Medicaid funded, and they can be out in the community and learning skills and doing all those kinds of things underneath of the Medicaid dollars as opposed to being under county dollars.
Yeah, and you know, I understand all that, you know, it's kind of property taxpayer versus other, but you know, dollars are dollars to me. Medicaid, county, it doesn't really matter to me, it's all taxpayer money. And you know, I have the same issue with the supported community living. You know, when, you know, I remember running budgets on a house, we had 3 people living in, it cost us $400,000 a year, and I'm like, how does this make sense for the taxpayer? I said, you know, we can take our seniors and put them into, you know, I get group homes for bad places, but you can take our seniors and put them in little complexes so you can reduce staffing needs and service costs so you can help them be independent, but you can't do that with people on intellectual disability. That makes no sense to me. It's like, how do we serve these people and give them a good quality of life and do the right thing, but do it at a number that we can afford, you know, because you can't be everything to everybody all the time. It's just, at some point, we're gonna break the bank.
We're at that point, unfortunately.
Yeah, we've broken the bank. Well, we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Because of the actions taken.
Right.
And again, you know, that's the other thing that frustrates me is we're gonna feel the consequences. Muscatine County residents are gonna feel the consequences for decisions that were outside our control.
Yeah.
We couldn't stop it. We have only 1 vote of 5. That's frustrating to me.
So from what I understand, Mr. Farmer will be sending us a bill for half of our 311,000, and I guess we need some direction about whether we hang on to that and not pay it, or.
What are we gonna pay for?
Maybe we'd issue them a warrant.
I
I mean, I guess we don't know what happens if we just refuse to pay it.
Well, that's why I've asked Alicia to look at the 2080 agreement to see if we're legally obligated to do it. And our analysis is both that the 2080 doesn't have specific numbers. It says in excess of permitted fund levels, and that fund level right now is 40%, which is not a problem for us. So we might get some noise.
Sure we are.
And that's fine. But I don't sense a consensus on the board to authorize swift payment of that.
Did everybody in the region budget at the same, did Scott budget $30?
I believe that we all did, is it, yeah, we're all at max levy for
Okay.
going forward.
And so how much are we taking in at max levy?
About 9.799.
And our spend is 12.7? That don't work very bad, good, does it?
So, that's the new math.
New math. Okay.
That really is the conversation the board needs to have, is this is what the 2080 says, and there's only one of us that's there. One county is there, and that's Jackson County, who has the lowest input of anybody.
Yeah, have them send their $1.98.
And they get the least amount of services between them and Cedar. I mean, I feel bad because they're paying a pretty good chunk in and they're not seeing much of this. Much of
Yeah.
the services.
Again, your rural populations are paying for the urban. Again and again. Follow on the dollar though.
And that's the kind of the perverse thing about, as I understand the political pressure on the region, or to keep the region levy down, or the mental health levies down, is driven by rural concerns. And those who want to make sure rural property taxes are not used to fund urban services. But perversely, that's precisely what's happening under this regime. So, Felicia, thank you for coming in and letting us know about the storms on the horizon.
We'll be at the next meeting.
Oh, yeah. So, would you forward to everybody that spreadsheet that
Sure.
David gave us and that, yeah,
Absolutely, you want the projection too? I can do that
in
as
all its
well.
glory?
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Felicia.
absolutely.
Thankfully now we have some happier news.
Way to go, Scott.
Good job. No, so, we have,
He has $311,000 in excess funds.
That's right. No, we have a presentation regarding the new mental health peer drop-in center at Muscatine Center for Social Action with MCSA Executive Director Scott Dulkey. And Scott, I understand you have a guest as well.
I do. I have Chris Anderson with me, and I'll explain towards the end
Come on, gentlemen.
Chris
Yeah.
Anderson's role.
Welcome.
How do I follow that news? Man.
You're the bluebird of happiness.
Well, we are fiscally responsible, and we're not on autopilot, I can assure you. I could talk about the regionalization of our mental health services for hours, but I will say that I was concerned that MCSA would be forgotten in the mix. Not MCSA, Muscatine would be forgotten in the mix. And that's why I'm excited here to tell you about the Peer Drop-In Center, because we weren't forgotten. Mental health care is intimidating to access, especially in smaller rural towns. They're often forgotten. It's hard to access that stuff. So being able to talk to you guys today about the Peer Drop-In Center is really exciting. For those of you who don't know me, I think there's only one on here that doesn't know me. I'm Scott Dulkey, the Executive Director of MCSA. Opening a Peer Mental Health Drop-In Center was a natural next step for MCSA. At our sheltering programs, about 80% of the people we serve are one-time homeless. They'll come in, they got behind on their rent, and they lack an affordable option. We can help stabilize the situation and get them back out into a stable condition. We'll never see them again. I've talked to Felicia about a recidivism rate. It's fantastic. 20%, however, they do return. And we looked into that 20%. What's going on here? What can we do to serve these folks better? And what we found is that they often have a chronic mental health condition. We knew we had to find a better way to take care of those people and offer them as big of a future as everybody else. I stole some of my notes from my speech that Mr. Mather and Mr. Sacedo came to, so sorry about your luck. You have to hear the same speech twice. For many people, not just in our community, access to mental health care is difficult. They don't know where to go, who to call, or what to say. They're just not familiar with it. I compared it to a phone. You take somebody else's phone and you try to access your brother. It's not hard. You don't know how to operate that new phone. It has a password on it, or we just don't know our brother's number anymore because it's all in our contact list, right? The difficulty is further compounded in smaller rural towns where resources are often lacking. When I first moved to Muscatine and started working in mental health care, that was very much my experience. I couldn't believe how far behind the times we were. I'm excited that we've made great strides at this point, and we'll talk a little more about some of those. Taking the first step to access mental health care is also extremely intimidating. With this new peer-led drop-in center, we are creating an extremely low barrier access point and better caring for people struggling with mental health issues. The aim is to create a cool yet inviting space where people can come and socialize. when you come, you'll experience a living room / coffee shop where people can come in without judgment and potentially access a wider array of treatment. There's no out-of-pocket expense, no requirements for admittance, no qualifications. They will have access to individual or group counseling as well as other peer-led activities on site. Let me explain to you a little bit what peer-led means. Evidence has shown that treatment is highly effective when a person can relate to someone else. When someone can share a personal story of how mental health affected them and how they successfully dealt with it, the result is incredibly empowering. When a person can hear someone else's story of hope, it will break the stigma and open doors to an incredible future. Anybody who's talked to me much has heard me remark that mental health is just like diabetes. You can't catch it from somebody else, and it's generally not because of the choices you make. But with proper care, you can live a long and healthy life. Opening the center allows our community to see that vision and offer the proper care so that no one has to struggle alone. With Iowa's increasing suicide rate on the rise, the need to get this done was significant. I want to thank you guys for your support to the Eastern Iowa Mental Health Disability Region for the funding to open the center. The region has made great strides to increase access to and quality of mental health care in our communities. And we should thank them for their Herculean efforts despite what we just heard, increasingly tight budgets. I also recognize our amazing partner in providing the service, the Robert Young Center. The Robert Young Center has remained dynamic and nimble. They have worked tirelessly to help our community address what was, and I emphasize was, a mental health desert. Their team has helped in every way possible to help us open the center, and they are providing the actual services through their top-notch, expertly trained staff. At our grand opening that Mr. Mather and Mr. Saceda went to, we displayed some artwork that was created by Chris Anderson. You can come up now. I thought it was a great story because Chris has also struggled with mental health service issues and has received treatment from Robert Young Center, and he's also been homeless and utilized MCSA services. So the fact that he has got himself into this position and was willing to give back to the community by creating artwork, we actually auctioned it off at the event. He also mimicked in his artwork artists that have also struggled with mental health issues. Van Gogh, he knows all those. I went to school for psychology, not artwork, and he can tell you all. I think Chris is a great example of what we're working for. He's a guy with a dream, he's a guy with drive, he's a guy with ambition. Sure, he's had some struggles, but he's battled through it, and look how well dressed he is now. Boom, boom. So I'll let Chris share a little bit about his artwork. That was literally amazing. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris Anderson. Thank you for having me. So we did 7 paintings total, but 4 of them were primarily based off of famous artists. I started with Van Gogh, and it's my version of A Starry Night. It's actually a sunny day in Muscatine, so when you see it, you'll get it. But Van Gogh struggled with impulsive behaviors and substance abuse issues. He cut his ear off. You know, if there was an ADHD diagnosis, then he probably would have got it. So that's what I have ADHD, or was diagnosed as a child, and that's how I represent that. So Salvador Dali is the second painting in it. It depicts suicide awareness and anti-bullying. Toward the end of his life, Salvador Dali struggled with suicidal tendencies. He dehydrated himself, starved himself to the point to where he just didn't want to live anymore. So that's kind of how this feeling is my version of melting clocks, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
The third artist is Louis Wayne. He painted cats, and he had schizophrenia. And if you look at this timeline of his life, you can see how his schizophrenia started to affect his artwork towards the later years of his life. They got very colorful and bizarre, and I just kind of wanted to show how schizophrenia can relate with artwork. And so I did my version of Boots, which is a children's book I illustrated for the MCSA.
You gotta see this one, it's amazing.
And
Boots, big as life.
Yep. And behind it, there's a psychedelic rainbow pattern, which represents Louis Wayne's work. And the last one is Jean Basquiat. And a lot of people don't know about him because he's a newer artist. He's from the 80s. He lived in Lower Manhattan, and he did graffiti artwork. He also did these enigmatic effigies, you know, encouraging things in subways and other places that are very bizarre, a lot of people, and that's what got the attention from him. He also had substance abuse issues. He died at 27 of a heroin overdose. What I found out this morning, though, fun fact, is that out of all American artists at auction, his artwork was the most expensive ever, at $110 million at auction, one of his pieces went for. I know, and it's just like, you know, if he only could ever saw that, you know, he'd be very proud of that.
So I also want Chris to kind of plug one of his initiatives. Again, I say that he's a man with a dream. Of course, he's got a past, we all do. He's got dream, he's got ambition, he's got drive, and he's working on a project called Paint the Pearl. His idea is he wants to beautify the downtown through paint. He's partnered with the Chamber of Commerce and Wild Things. They've got a savings account set up for him at the chamber so people can donate to this cause. And with that money, Chris will use the money to purchase paint and create murals all over the downtown.
Yep. You pretty much nailed it. I've done a lot of murals in town, like the one that says Muscatine down on 2nd in Iowa, the one behind the Pearl Museum. There's currently one on 2nd of a postcard up high, and that's down by the mural. There's a big white wall you might have noticed. I recently primed it, getting it ready for a mural of Mark Twain. He wrote of Muscatine summer sunsets and how they're so beautiful. So I'm basically taking that poem and painting it. So that poem is basically instruction for this next job I'm doing. So far, like you saw, we were able to get enough funding for our primer and to get it started prepping it. But I mean, we're always looking for more help with support for that because we'd like these paintings to last. And I feel like, you know, paint's expensive. Plain and simple nowadays. So yeah, also I wanted to thank Flower Gallery for my outfit. They do great tux rentals. And
one guy in a dream.
And Hill's Paint Store, because that's who I work with locally for our paint. So, yeah, that's about it.
Yes, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Chris.
You followed very well. I mean, you showed that there's a reason that we work as hard as we do to make sure that the funds are there because we're pencil pushers, not Felicia, but we're moving stuff around, and you guys are doing the work. So thank you.
Well,
And you
thanks for the
changed the
support to
laws.
the region. I know a lot of those decisions are difficult. I know we want to put Muscatine first, and I fully support that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need to be more worried about who's going to follow you guys. So Keith,
Yeah, from hard work to a utility permit, oh boy.
County Engineer Keith White, everybody.
Don't take that personally.
Thank you guys.
Good morning.
Good morning, Keith.
We have 6 permits today. 2 of them, 4 of them. 4 of them are from the Eastern Iowa Light Power REC of Bolton, Iowa. The first is to install new poles and 4 beneath Hampton Road X43. And this is basically replacing some poles and services that were struck by lightning in basically just north of the county line. That one. The second one is to set new poles on Solomon Avenue and Boar West, where the bike trail runs, the Ford Avenue extension, and place poles along the north side of the right-of-way there. Third is to replace an exposed cable in the creek on 231st or G28 just east of Vestal Avenue. So bore and plow, cable and 3 transformers will be set. And the last from them is to bore a service beneath Bayfield Road from 1902 North Tipton north to 2519 Bayfield Road. So it's about 120 feet west. That's the REC.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve. I'll second.
Jeff moves, Santos is second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Then we have 2 permits from Muscatine Power and Water of Muscatine, Iowa. The first is to replace overhead communication lines with underground lines on 57th Street, Stewart Road, west of house number 2385. And the second is to replace overhead electric with underground lines, same location.
Second.
Are they directionally boring all that?
That pull up plans.
And if they are, I'd like to know if we know the depths that they're putting that in, because it's all going in the right way.
Okay. It's all right here on the plan, it's all bored.
Okay.
30-inch depth conduit. That requires, that one was the, I think I handed you the
2-inch conduit.
handed you the communication, which we require 30-inch depth for communication cables. And then this is the electrical, I mean, the permit requires that, and I don't think they have to show it on their plans, but that's the electrical showing the 48-inch minimum required by the permit.
So what was the 30-inch then?
Communications.
One was communications, one was electrical.
So do we ever have concerns about, frost on this, being that normally we're gonna have 3 feet for frost coverage?
No.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking a,
Well, it's 2-inch conduit and it's,
yeah.
fiber, I'm just asking, just in,
No,
as far as movement
no,
goes.
I mean, frost is
Normally with
normally
the
concerned
48-inch, I'm fine with, because
with
you know
freezing
you're
up
gonna.
a water main, not a conduit.
Okay.
We have a motion by Steve Scott, second by Jeff. All those in favor?
Right.
Projects up?
Projects update, and just going to the 2 bridge replacement projects, which are box culverts. The first on North Isaac, McCully culvert, they poured the whole culvert and backfilled the culvert, so they're not real far from being done, but wet weather probably slows them down a little. Iowa Bridge and Culvert on 155th, they've poured the inlet wall slab, the outlet curtain wall in the middle of the wall. And they've still been moving kind of slow, but they're supposed to have more crew on site this week. That's pretty much it on construction projects that are still underway. Questions? Design projects, 231st or G28 paving. Just again, every week, that's in the November 19th letting. We met with Hickory Hills at their, I think probably their annual meeting last Monday night, just to answer questions. There really wasn't anything new to come up there, other than they're of course interested in any help that we can give them. And Bridge 163, which is up west of West Lippert on 120th, is also in the November 19th letting. The other thing we've got going are plans for the Salisbury Road repair, which we're planning a letting at our office October 9th, and so 14th. see it peeking out behind the screen. We'd hope to bring the results from that here. We did set that for completion this year. And I guess the bids, the contractors will tell us if that's doable or not. Would really like to get it done.
Keith, can you tell us, I got a call on Hickory Hills, what was the conversations that you guys had that you shared with the group meeting that you said you had?
Well, we were asked to attend the group meeting.
Okay.
Again, I think it's their annual meeting. I know my subdivision has its annual meeting this month. Just to let the residents that were asked questions that ranged anywhere from why are we moving the road? To I thought you were going all the way to Independence, to there were just a variety of questions
A lot of stuff. Okay.
like that. What was the primary, and we talked about the staging that the plans calls for, you know, the fact that, you know, sometimes they can run around Funk's Hill, sometimes they'll have to go west, sometimes they can only go east and not west. And until we have it let and have a contractor and maybe he has a better idea.
Okay.
Those sorts of concerns, and, you know, their only question as far as help was, of course, it's a financial burden on them to locate their main and to probably, they're likely constructing a new piece of main. Once they haven't done anything as far as locating that.
Yeah. And that's what I got a call on earlier in the week, so I didn't know that you had already had a meeting with them.
Yeah, it was a week ago, Monday night.
Okay. All right.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Other on, we have to get you a new map printed for your wall one of these days, but Bridge 132, which is on North Isett, just south of 112, or what we call Steel Mill Road, or it's north of Highway 6. The bridge inspectors, the bridge inspectors were in the county. I think they're probably gone and done now, but they might still be here. I don't know what weather did, but they called and said, close the bridge. Now, we knew that was coming. What we have done at this point is we went and looked at it. We have closed a corner of the bridge. We're going to attempt a fix. But the situation's kind of like if you have an artery cut open, spurting blood, and you stick a Band-Aid on it, it's probably not gonna have much long-term success. But we're hoping to keep it open if we can do something. And I brought along a lot of information on that I can show you now, but I presume show you later. I may have spoke to it the other week, one of the other weeks, but I mean, we're fighting an absolute losing battle there. So just really mainly wanted to make you aware of that, because it gets closed, you probably will get calls.
And this is I call it, you know, it's up the metal span up there off the curb, off the old blacktop, yeah, the one that, do we have traffic counts on that, Keith? You have all that, right?
Yeah, we do have that. It's not very high, but I mean, the road never it never went where that bridge is. It veered to the northwest and came in at a nice 90 and it crossed I think it's, I'm trying to think which creek that is. It would have crossed the creek at a nice 90-degree angle, and, you know, essentially, like I said, they went straight north, they built a new bridge. I could show you the plans. They excavated the channel. They put put the bridge abutment where the old channel was and filled in under there with, straightened it up, well, the river or creek is going back to where it was. And I brought the aerials, just the historical, to show you how far it's moved in just a few years. And we're talking massive dollars to fight Mother Nature to maintain that structure.
So do the homeowners have access through another route to get to their homes?
Sure.
Well, there's nobody on the quote north, I guess it doesn't matter, it's in the middle, but nobody on the north side of the bridge, but on the south side, there's probably 4 homeowners that come in off of 6.
And
A new bridge, $1 million.
yeah,
You either want to, you're gonna have to, if you want to, you're gonna decide if you're gonna spend $1 million on. This board, prior to my arrival, decided the one on North Ice north of there should not be replaced. It was a fraction of this cost, and it would have been a much more valuable bridge to have. Now you're looking at $1 million for a handful of people.
I think the only comments we got on it was there were a couple of farmers that wanted to run the machinery, so they didn't have to run up 38, right? But it's already embargoed, right?
It is, it's 10, 15, 15, but if we can't stop what's happening on the south abutment, it'll be closed.
How old is that?
Oh. What I remembered, I'm trying to see if it's on here, but 55 is what I remember. Maybe it was 50. Here we go, maybe it was 53. It's 53. I remember this older than I am. 1953. So that bridge was doomed when it was put in. We have examined it in the past for strengthening, and which everything was never built for that to happen. So it would never rated a legal bridge again. So anyway, that was just one to let you know. It's a big deal when something like that happens.
The next set of calls coming up.
Don't know. The folks I run into when I'm up there really want to be able to run across there with their 4-wheelers.
Saw a guy riding on a snowmobile on water. Bet a 4-wheeler could do it.
Going fast enough, right?
Okay. All right, thank you, Keith. All right, moving on. Item number 9, discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the September 23rd, 2019 regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I'm gonna say Jeff has moved, Santos has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Correspondence, Santos?
So I just had the call from Hickory Hills in regards to one of the homeowners asking me in regards to the water main, and if we, as a county, have identified with MPW whose ownership is it, and I explained to him about how we'd had a conversations with MPW and that is their responsibility as part of the Hickory Hills, and he was good with it. Not very happy, but good with it. So
Yeah, I had numerous calls and meetings and correspondence, not necessarily, mostly in-person contacts on the proposal of power line, a high tension, I call them, or high voltage power line. The proposal, apparently there was a meeting held. I'd talked to Keith and Eric, and maybe Eric will spend a few minutes and tell you, kind of get the board up to date on what we're learning, what's all involved here. But bottom line is, the county, the city knew nothing about this. MPW, this is an MPW thing for their N+2, I think they're calling it. And it's basically the proposal is 160,000 volt or more, running out Mulberry, across Bayfield to Tipton, up Tipton, to 180th and then over to a substation. So Eric, maybe you could shed it a little. And again, there's a pretty good sized group of people that are quite opposed to that.
You want me to do that now, or? Okay,
Yeah.
Which one? Okay.
That makes sense now, bro.
So it's kind of been a whirlwind week of trying to get some information. I got a couple calls, I think probably about the same time you guys did, from some residents. It's really kind of the first we're hearing about the size and scope and route on this project. I don't think Keith got much information, if any. So I did a little checking with Power Water just to try to get some more information, and that's just kind of led to me entertaining, I need to get more information, more details. They're a little vague at this point, other than the proposed route, but they didn't provide me yet with what side of each roads. You know, they've kind of reached out to them as to why this project, or what's the requirement, why they would be looking at this route. It was based on an N-2. It's basically a redundancy, fail-safe requirement the utilities have to have. So if two of their critical pieces of infrastructure, whether it's transmission or generation, go down, can they still meet the demands of their customer base? So what they're doing with this is looking at where their transmission lines are at and trying to build in fail-safes that aren't using the same route, so that they're spreading their risk between switching stations, so that if we have a tornado or a major windstorm, they don't have all their, in their words, eggs in one basket, so they can meet this N-2 requirement. So unfortunately, the initial route that they've proposed runs in front of a number of residences, as opposed to if you went 1 mile north, it's much more rural. So there's some, and this project, from my understanding at this point, involves utility easement on private property, not within the county road right of way where we see a lot of utilities. So they'd be leasing a significant portion of the frontage of a lot of these residential properties. So I want to look at this, get some more answers from them, because one of the things they're supposed to look at is conflict with current land uses and future land uses. Part of this route does have some undeveloped, albeit already zoned residential land, and you can about imagine the impact on ground that's been zoned. We expect to see future development, but if the first, say, 70 feet is tied up with the utility easement and a 75-foot high voltage transmission line. So I think there's still a lot of questions yet to be asked. And, for you folks to decide, you want to weigh in on this. From what I understand, there's a significant objection to it. A significant number of neighbors, particularly in the Bayfield stretch, that are very much objecting to this proposed route.
So MPW had this meeting with the homeowners, or how did we get the information?
Yeah, apparently they scheduled they had a map that was a project notification map where they notified everybody in this vicinity. And it extended beyond just the route, so the general vicinity, to include some possible alternative routes too. They notified everybody and scheduled some sort of public meeting. I believe that was
the Public Utilities Commission that did that. So
Yeah.
they applied to the Public Utilities Commission as a part of that process. I think SIPCO and REC both had, and so I think the commission was out here a week or so ago, met at the River Center. They met, I think they also did something in Wilton for the SIPCO stuff, and they did out here. So there were 2 hearings held. And I think at that hearing, there was a significant, what would you say, opposition to the plan. Voice. So in talking with the MPW communications director on this project, or the guy handling it, he indicated, yeah, we've got a lot of people expressing opposition and concerns, and they're, I don't know the next step. I did reach out as well to the city of Muscatine, because of course, one of the things I heard from a resident was annexation attempt, and the city was unaware of the process as well. So I reached out to the city administrator and also the planning and zoning city, and they were both not involved and unaware, so, I think they're probably interested in understanding more as well, so.
And what size voltage did you say this is?
161,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's a transmission line.
cause in talking with them even, they talked about looking at 180th too. I think 180th already has lines like 75,000 volt there, and say, well, that doesn't give us what we're looking for, the redundancy of a in plus two, minus two, because we already have transmission lines there that we'd be running on the same poles. And I think it's in partnership with SIPCO, I think they're
Well,
gonna
they gotta be
share
connected,
poles
they're
in
probably
some
connected to
place.
the main grid is what they're doing.
Yeah.
What is the process for approval that they ultimately have to go through here? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, could they just decide, screw it, we're gonna do it?
This is a project from what I've seen, looking into the Iowa code and talking to them, that it has eminent domain eligibility, or at least the ability to go to that hearing, that process. And where they lay out all their reasons why this route is strategically important. And then the process involves, the Iowa Utilities Board and the judge. And their initial indications are, to me, take that for what it's worth, is that important and this project needs to happen. However, they are reevaluating the route to the north, and I think the neighbors have proposed that they look at. They are evaluating the concerns. That's,
Yeah, and I think my hope would be that, it's a local utility, both of them, that we could work this out with the local jurisdictions and kind of come to something that would work for them and work for the neighbors. And, I think MPW is expressing a willingness to do that, or an interest in doing that too. I think they understood they maybe step on a hot pile of coals there, and they want to make it go. They live in this community, they want to be a good part of the community, and I think they're gonna attempt to work with everybody on it. So the question is, how do you set that forum up, and how do you do that effectively?
I'm aware of it. It actually would affect my property.
Right.
The transmission line would run on my side. So I've already sent a letter to the utility board to let them know my opposition on it. From what I understand, the group is getting together to lawyer up.
That's correct. They have an attorney, they've proposed alternate routes. They've got my understanding it's a group of 30 to 40 people that are opposing this route. So it's gonna be met with opposition. I think MPW kind of starting to understand that. And, my hope is that, we can just all sit down and work. And I think the group has said that they're interested in, working as good neighbors, want to understand the problem and work through it. But kind of the process was a little bit, they were taken aback by it, get a letter in the mail, and then pretty soon you got a utility meeting and, no real, not a lot of local involvement initially, so.
Do you have those maps that they proposed? Can you share those with us when we get some time?
I think Jeff forwarded an email on the 24th.
Yeah.
That's got,
Both options?
It shows.
I don't know if they've got both.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
proposed
the
route.
proposed, yeah, but I was looking at the options ones that he talked about.
The one I found quite interesting was the notification map. Because I had a list, and I hope I sent that, maybe I didn't, but the notification map I sent, a number of what I would call reasonably sized neighborhoods were not notified. And they were, it appears, feet away from the boundary of the map, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I think they might have a thing or two to say and concern, so.
That's what I was asking.
yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I have an email for that.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
The alternate or the?
The alternate, the alternate.
No, I haven't seen the alternate.
That's what I was asking. Yeah.
Well, and there was a PowerPoint presentation. Did you go to the meeting?
Yes.
And there was a PowerPoint, correct? And I asked for that, and instead I was kind of given some select slides, which I think they've made some changes to, because it now makes mention to them looking at a proposed alternative route, so, things are changing, and possibly they are looking at it.
Well, I talked to the project managers, and they were very open and very, I think, very interested in trying to, get to a good solution on this. So I don't think FPW is taking a difficult stance on this. I think it's just trying to connect the right people and get them sitting down in a room and working something out and understanding the whole problem, but.
So the alternate route, I can't imagine that those landowners are jumping for joy on that situation.
There will be only about 4 of them as opposed to 20-some on a certain east-west section. An alternate route would possibly be going a mile north and running across 180 all the way to Mulberry instead of through Bayfield from Tipton to Mulberry, very rural areas. But you're probably correct. I mean, the alternate people, but and they're really agricultural, which, you know, the use limitations would still be less. You could just collect your lease check and still hold.
I understand your point, but I also understand my point.
Sure, there's gonna be those 4.
I don't know.
Yeah, if you have that proposal, that'd be good.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah.
chance. Okay. All right.
That was.
That was a long one.
That was Mike, yes, sir.
Appreciate it. I would say I had a couple of calls, probably nowhere near as many as Jeff, but same information. Scott?
I have no correspondence on that.
I have correspondence concerning the same thing. No committee meetings. The only thing I would like to add is we still are missing one race at the West Liberty Speedway, and it was scheduled for September 20th, got rained out. It's rescheduled for the 27th, got rained out. Now we're pushing her out to October 12th. So we'll all be out of town.
I had no committee.
I had the mental health meeting, which we heard in length about, and the also went to the Peer Drop-In Center grand opening, which we also heard about.
I had the Bi-State Commission on Wednesday.
And Santos?
I had the West Liberty Economic Development Committee, and then I also had the peer-to-peer mental health grand opening.
All right. Any county employees? All right, administration office, number 13. Item 13A is discussion and possible action authorizing the chair to execute a memorandum of understanding with AFSCME Iowa Council 61 to allow the county to fill the jail bookkeeper position at a higher step than allowed under the current union contract.
Okay, the current contract that we have with ASME allows us as the employer to hire somebody in up to step 3, assuming that they have equivalent number of years of previous service. The sheriff's office is in the process of seeking a replacement for the bookkeeper, who will be retiring. They have, the candidate they have found that they want to hire has 22 years of banking experience. They feel would be a very good fit. They would like to hire them in at step 5. It's a 7-step plan. But because the language of the union contract is as it is, we had to seek their approval to go outside the contract for this particular hire. So that's what the memorandum of understanding in front of you is. The union had absolutely no objections to it. And then when we get to item B, I'll just go ahead. That is the hiring process form for you to approve to actually approve hiring that individual.
Might make sense to take both items at the same time.
I would just like to ask a question, please.
Yes.
What's the dollar difference between 3 and 5? Get me close. Just get me close.
I can tell you that. Would be about $2.20.
Very good.
I'll move the approval.
A second.
And just to clarify, this is moving the approval of the execution of the memorandum and the action to request the hire?
Correct.
Correct. A,
Okay,
B.
so Jeff has moved, Santos is second, approval of A and B.
Correct.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 13C, discussion and possible action to approve and authorize the chair to execute the FY 1920 Iowa Burn Justice Assistant Grant Program contract in the amount of $35,253.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff has moved, Santos is seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Discussion and possible action, this is 13D, to approve and authorize the chair to execute the FY 1920 methamphetamine drug hotspots grant program contract in the amount of $9,000.
I move to approve.
Second.
Scott has moved, Jeff has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Item 13E, action to accept the September 2019 payroll claims.
Move to approve.
Second.
Scott has moved, Jeff has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Anyone have anything else?
I just wanted to make sure that we can follow up with staff to see if we can look into, maybe put it on the agenda or something where Eric can look at the Washington Street. Seeing what we can do to either have conversations with the city or looking at ways we can probably get rid of that property.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Anybody else?